Welcome, everyone. Today is January 16th, 2019. This is a meeting of the Topeka City Council's Policy and Finance Committee. And with me, I'm Karen Hiller, District 1, and I'm the chair. And I will let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Jeff Cohen, District 8.
Tony Emerson with District 4.
All right, and we have staff with us. If you want to quickly self-introduce, and then we'll start.
Brent Trout, City Manager.
Catherine Walter, Senior Assistant City Attorney.
Jackie Russell, Human Resources Director.
Lisa Robertson, City Attorney.
And Liz Toyne, our council staff, who's made herself in a place with no mic. All right. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all in the audience. Our goal today is to work on the city's residency requirement, a consideration of dropping that requirement. We had a pair of hearings on December the 19th to consider testimony about that. It appears that most of the folks in the audience are returning just to see what we're going to do with that, which is great, and we very much appreciate you being here. With that, then, we will we'll approve the minutes from December 19th and then go straight into that residency requirement issue. We do have some staff reports. My understanding is that there's maybe more than one person that has an update for us from the audience. Otherwise, we're planning to go straight into updates on the staff, what the implementation might look like with the staff, and a discussion amongst ourselves as a committee, with a hope that if there is some emerging consensus, that we can come out of the meeting today with a recommendation to the governing body. Any questions about the agenda? Otherwise, I would
have a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have to vote twice for 2 sets of minutes?
Had brief discussion beforehand. Unless legal says otherwise, we put this on the agenda as a single day's set of minutes, which happens to be 2 sets. So I think it would be one motion.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. One amendment to the minutes has come to my attention. That would be in the big set, the 3 o'clock set on the 4th page. Under public comment, Matt Bergman was here representing AFSCME, and the person who typed the minutes wasn't sure what that was and made up something, but it really is, it was clever. American Society of Mechanical Engineers Water Union, but it was the AFSCME chapter of the water union for that. So we'll change that to AFSCME or spell it out with water. So any problem with that amendment going in? All right.
No.
With that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Thank you, Liz. And we'll move right into the residency requirement. You go ahead and take the updates from the audience first. I think we have one. If there are more than one, let me know. Please introduce yourself and share it.
Aaron Freeman, President, Topeka Firefighters Local 83. The December meeting, I know when I addressed you guys, I informed you that I was aware of a couple individuals that were in hiring processes of other places due to the residency requirement. Since then, we have seen the resignation of one of those individuals. The second one, I don't want to quite comment on right now today, but also I've learned of 2 other individuals that are also in hiring processes in surrounding cities due to residency. So it's been said a lot by members of the council and staff that this really hasn't been a problem for the fire department. Historically, it is a problem for the fire department. So I thought it was fair for me to bring that to your attention so you guys were updated with the correct information.
If I could ask,
Sure.
Are those people who have left or who are looking, people who already lived outside the city who were under their probationary period and have decided they don't want to have to move into the county? Or are they, if you know, I don't want you to say too much.
Yeah, I really don't want to, because I don't know the hiring dates of each of those individuals specifically, so the probationary periods that I'm not 100% positive on. but to address, we have a couple issues. One, we have attracted employees from other cities to come to Topeka to work, and they really don't want to leave their hometown, or so that's why they're going back. The other is we have.
And this is a nearby hometown or a
Yes.
faraway
No,
hometown? That's what I'm trying to clarify.
It's nearby that they
Okay.
could commute from.
Okay.
So that's the majority of what we have, bringing people in from out of county, and then they're not willing to stay here, so.
So just to clarify, then, these are people who already live in Kansas. They live in small towns or rural areas
Surrounding
outside Shawnee
counties,
County.
yep.
And so they're nearby. It's not somebody coming from Wisconsin.
And we have one that's from out of state that will be returning, so that probably wouldn't directly impact this, but the other ones,
Right.
yes.
Okay. Any questions, colleagues? Any other? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Any other comments that people brought to the meeting yet? Okay, as I told those who were here earlier, we're going to go into the staff reports and then into our discussion, but I keep a little more of an informal schedule than some, and so if somehow along the way you feel like you've got something to contribute, go ahead and raise your hand and we will work you into the conversation. Okay. All right, we asked for some staff reaction on the basis of, if we were to go ahead and drop this residency requirement, what could that mean in terms of people's existing agreements and certain jobs that do require, that have traditionally required a callback time period, an availability to work within a certain amount of time, and also were there some things in that we ought to think through, because since residency has been assumed, maybe they weren't written into job descriptions or departmental requirements because there was an assumption it wasn't a problem. So with that, I will defer to City Manager, and you handle the answers however.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman. What we're looking at first is I want to have Catherine cover the impacts related to the personnel code and the contracts, and then Jackie will cover any of the other typical employees that might have a timeline that is included in their job description, and how she views that we would handle any of those types of situations. So, Catherine, you can start us out, please.
All right. I've handed out to those of you at the table and a couple in the audience a document that legal prepared. It basically sets forth the personnel code language, followed by the language of each of our 7 unions. And all 7 unions have a residency provision that is basically mirrors, with some tweaks, what's currently in the personnel code. So as you mentioned, what happens if the personnel code removes the residency requirement? And what this document tries to do is address that, along with the question of which union contracts have reporting time requirements. So we've color-coded this. But first I'm going to talk about those that have no color coding. And there's 3 contracts, AFT, Teamsters, and WPC contracts, that do not have any reporting time requirements, and they are silent as to the impact of any change to the personnel code. Then we move to development services, and FOP indicate that should this, I'm reading from development services, but FOP is very similar. Should the city council make amendments to or repeal the current city code regarding residency requirements, the union and the city agree to meet and confer regarding such changes. And FOP's language is similar. So if the personnel code changes, then the contracts provide that we will sit down with those 2 unions and meet and confer. The other 2, International Association of Firefighters and Water AFSCME, was that right? Water AFSCME, oh, I've talked about that. International Association of Firefighters and I might have misspoke, and I'm really sorry if I did. FOP?
He has the minutes time too.
Right. Those that have reporting requirements in their contract are highlighted in red, which is FOP, firefighters, and water AFSCME. Both FOP and IAFF are 30-minute time reporting time requirements, and water AFSCME is a 45-minute time requirement. The water AFSCME contract at the very bottom also indicates that, as I just said, they would be governed by changes to the personnel code, except with respect to that part of their contract that provides that they will reside within a distance which will allow them to report to work in an emergency in no more than 45-minute period of time.
So that one wouldn't change.
The 45-minute reporting
That one would
time
not.
would not.
The others would both have reopeners.
FOP and Development Services have automatic reopeners. Fire and water would basically follow the personnel code changes, but for the 45-minute report requirement and water. And then the other three, Teamsters, WPC, and, I'm sorry, the other four, AFT and the other three, AFT, have no language. So it would require, I haven't looked at, it would require a mutual agreement to reopen to discuss the personnel code changes. Otherwise, their contracts would remain the same. AFT, Teamsters, and WPC.
Okay.
Madam Chair. Thank you. Mrs. Walter, does that mean the entire contract reopens or just that one issue?
Just that one provision.
Okay, thank
On
you.
residency.
Because what we're looking for, what I'm looking for, I should say, is we've had a lot of testimony in favor of it. But we want to make sure as a committee that we're also having folks disclose to us what downsides there might be. We have a couple of contracts that are still in negotiation. I think when this started, we were told that wasn't really an issue with people, but nonetheless, and there's a limit to what you can say, and whether there are in these labor contracts some departmental rules. We've heard a little bit that police department is a little flexible about how they do that rather than requiring everybody to be on a report to duty, use a duty roster instead or whatever y'all call it to get people who volunteer for callbacks, and same with fire. Is that right? Okay, callback list. So any downsides to this change that you can envision if we were to make the change?
Is there a downside to
Yeah,
the union
causing
contracts?
problems and churn and difficulties because of that.
No, I think, as I, both the personnel code change usually or often precedes any other changes within the individual labor contracts.
Okay. But, you know, just aside from the contracts, what the workplace and the needs of doing those jobs.
I'm aware of no legal issues that would.
That being your hat, I assume you're going to pass it down the line.
Right. In my position, as we've looked at this, we feel that there aren't any issues. I think that we can go back and address and open these particular items with those that have openers, and it changes and becomes similar based on some that relate to the code. We can talk with those that don't have a reopener, and some of them, I think one of them has a contract this year anyway. Yeah, so there would be one that would be coming up this year where we wouldn't even need to do an opener, it would just become part of the negotiation. So I think more or less they can be addressed in short order. If there was a decision to make a change to remove the residency requirement, they could be addressed in short order and negotiation and decision made.
Well, if we could have the other report, and then we'll, for those that are not under contract.
So those that are not under contract or do not have a response time in their contract, but do not also require a meet and confer if there was a change made, we would address that by the specific positions and the position descriptions. So, for example, there would be a need to have some response time for certain WPC positions in case of flooding Teamsters positions in case of snow removal primarily. Those are things that are the immediate need. For non-union positions, what comes to mind is our emergency management positions. And my recommendation would be that if there was a change to the personnel code, that we work with our department directors and have them work with their division and section managers to review all of the position descriptions based on the function, and then determine what position descriptions would need to have response times added to them that are covered by the personnel code. And that way, we would ensure that we had a thorough review so that if there was an event that happened, there would be not a lag in response based on a change to the residency.
I appreciate that. I think that's important. Any questions or comments on the part of my colleagues? Okay. Anything else to share?
No.
Okay. Anything else from the audience? All right. Well, just to kind of speed the conversation along, and Liz, I can give you one of these if you like. I put together just a list of possible recommendations that could come out of this committee. And I'll read them quickly so that people know what we have, and then I would, unless people have another way, like us to just start from the top and work through. I think there's language, in fact, that we could just grab onto, you kind of mix and match and pick out of these, and we might be able to build a recommendation out of this short list. The first option is no change, of course. That should always be there. The second one is to simply take that residential requirement and drop it. No further conversation. The third would be to drop the residential requirement, but at least as far as our recommendation goes, retain the authority for job descriptions and duty assignments to require report times. A little addition to that, an optional addition to that, would be to formally, from our committee's point of view, suggest a review of job performance expectations, adding language requiring familiarity with the city as appropriate for job duties. If that, for instance, has been assumed because of the residency requirement, and it might be important to add in terms of job description language for certain positions. And it looks like I got my numbers off, so what says number 3 again should be number 4. Hard to get good help, right? Along the way, and particularly last time when we talked about this, those who are here know that we talked about the fact that the underlying reason for this discussion was recruitment and getting workers and getting good workers. And we included then in that conversation the fact that minority recruitment is a corresponding high priority, recruiting more minority and women to our workforce and diversifying the workforce. And that we didn't want to lose the efforts on that part based on making it easier to hire just anybody and ending up with a workforce that wasn't any more diverse than what we had. So the fourth possible piece of the recommendations from this committee would be to recommend a corresponding management policy that demonstrates didn't have time to review this, where it requires a demonstration that we have an affirmative minority and women recruitment program, and suggest that that be documented in each of our recruitment efforts, and evidenced by procedures, as well as evidence of minorities in the pools of finalists and in the hires. And a corresponding issue that we have that came up was the issue of just promoting residency. If we weren't going to require it, were we going to make affirmative efforts to encourage people to live here? And we have faced this in the private sector as well. It's a suggestion that we've talked about in terms of JADO and the economic incentives that we have as well. And that one might say, require that the city of Topeka affirmatively promote residency in the city as evidenced by promotional materials and residency data of our employee workforce. So, and a possible addition to that then would be to take that same recommendation to JADO and recommend that all employers who receive JADO incentives are required to demonstrate affirmative recruitment for residency in the city, as evidenced by documentation of their materials and approach and feedback from their applicants and employees. So I went ahead and added those in as they were really substantial to our discussion. So at this point, do you think that I covered the options? Are there other options that either of you would like us to consider as we move toward a recommendation? Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not necessarily other options, but just on that last one, and first of all, thank you for doing all these. This is nice. On the last one, I think we'd have to be careful with the JADO incentives that it's not just residential in the city, since it's the county also as well.
Well, we could say the city.
Well, yeah, we could. We might. I guess there's 4 of us on JADO that are city members. I guess we could. Say that it wouldn't be.
It's a really good point, and I'm open. I got these so we had something on the table.
But my only thing, I guess, about some of these options about, I've worked in contracting a long time, and especially with federal contracts, we have to demonstrate that's a good faith effort, and I hate to say it, but it just becomes a paperwork thing, where we check off a box that we called such and such and such and such and gave them an opportunity. I don't know if it really moves the needle to, getting people, unless we have jobs. Some projects, they absolutely say, the DOD might say you will have this much WBE or, either women or minority business enterprise on this project, and then you do. But it just leads to, I'm trying to think, I guess, the right way to express it, but it just kind of leads to almost sham transactions and stuff, where people set up companies, and I know that's not maybe directly analogous to hiring, but I would love to move the needle on that. I just don't know if any of this would.
My response to that, and I don't want to spend too much time repeating because I talked about it last time too, is I don't want the relaxation of the residency requirement to mean that we would say, oh, well, we got enough people, and fail to do the affirmative hiring efforts that we've been doing and end up with the same workforce that we had before, because in police and fire are largely represented here, and both of you have affirmative programs that you're doing that appear to be bearing some fruit. But if we have been having trouble hiring in any department, there are different places to recruit. But if we go, well, now that the residency requirement is off, we can just put it on the internet and see who shows up, and we're good to go. Where, for instance, in engineering, if we should be recruiting at historically black universities so we get minority engineers, we don't just say, well, there wasn't anybody, so we're going to hire the best person from the pool. When we haven't made an effort to diversify the pool, that troubles me, and I see dropping the residency requirement as something that could potentially cause people to drop back on those affirmative hiring efforts. And so what we have here would be, we don't have an ordinance or anything. These would be recommendations at this point from the committee to the governing body for their consideration. It lets those messages go forward, at least from us. So that's why I wanted to make sure it was there. Jackie?
I do have a comment about the minority and women recruitment recommendation. And it'd be my recommendation that that be handled more through affirmative action programs for each of the departments. We already have affirmative action covered in the personnel code rather than be tied to the residency. It's something that we could track, and then if there is recruitment initiatives attached to it, that those have a priority for. And the other thing is either county or city residency. Tying it to city residency, such as in number 4, I understand promoting city residency, but right now the residency requirement is Shawnee County, so I don't know if that creates a perception of becoming more restrictive or an expectation of being more restrictive than what the current code is. And so that might be something else to think about for the number 4.
That is exactly why I put that in there. In that once that policy is gone, then all that county or city is gone, And if what we're trying to do as a city is sell our city, that this is a place that you want to live, work, and play, I want us to do, I want us to do that. And so and we've struggled with our businesses not doing that either. And so putting together pieces that would promote our neighborhoods and our amenities, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time kind of bemoaning the fact that some of our big businesses just say, and encourage people to live in Lawrence. Well, we're the city. If we're not actively promoting living in the city, who will? And if we do a good job with that, they can use our materials as well. And so if it's voluntary, that's fine. We're working on all sorts of initiatives in the city and with JADO to make this a place people want to live. But to me personally, it's important that we practice what we preach, if you will, and that, because at this point, whether, if what we want to encourage them with a smile on our face to do is live in the city, because we do, then they don't have to, but at least we've given it. None of the promotions have ever included a variety of neighborhoods, for instance, to encourage people with different desires in terms of how much they spend on a house or what kind of neighborhood they have, or lack of desire for that matter. We had kind of a start at it a couple of years ago when the Channel 4 folks did some videos for the council districts. It didn't last very long. That's what I'm talking about.
And we do some recruitment brochures, and I'd be happy to send some examples of past ones that do promote the Topeka metropolitan area and some of the highlights, maybe not as specific as down to neighborhoods, but certainly provides links to school district information and such like that I'd be happy to share, that would just show you how we have tried to promote the community for recruitments. Those are not necessarily the entry-level recruitments that we've done that for, but more specialized positions and executive positions. But we do develop brochures that do talk a lot about the Topeka community.
Well, and I would suggest, again, from this conversation, that if we're trying to recruit at all levels and we want everybody to be familiar enough with the city to even consider living here, that we need to do that up and down the line. So I put that in here because it could have this conversation with the full council and maybe with you as well. Not being critical, we just have required it before, so we didn't need to promote it, right? Right. And so it changes when it's optional, maybe in a good way. Because if we want that person who wants that entry-level job who lives in Osage City to move here sometime right away or in time, then we can promote that. Comments?
Yeah, I was just wanting to know, are we going to move on one of these items, or what are you recommending here, Chair?
I'll tell you what I am sensing is that there is support for dropping the requirement.
I think there is.
That we're wanting to as your chair at least, or as a group, we're wanting to be careful and make sure we've covered the backside of that in terms of moving out. So suggesting, as number 3 does, to retain authority for job descriptions and duty assignments, to include that where appropriate. The staff will figure out between HR and legal exactly how that would play out, but we're just making a recommendation. The 3A as well, just as part of our communication to say, and we encourage the staff to review the job performance expectations and so on. What Jackie has said is, at this point, we've now had that conversation, and she would expect to do that, so that's easy. Yes?
I just wanted to ask HR, do the individual departments have specific job descriptions that do require duty times?
Some do. It varies by function. If it's covered in the contract, it's probably not. And we do have, more specifically, we have a designation of emergency and non-emergency positions. But if there is a change, I think that it would be my recommendation for us to go back and look at all of those and just make sure that it is incorporated into the position descriptions.
And that could also include the department heads, which have been required.
And at this time, they're all designated as emergency employees.
Right. So, go ahead. I'm sorry. Were you done?
From the cities, the benefit of the city, which one would HR recommend? Are you allowed to do that?
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to or not, but I will.
I mean,
My recommendation.
over dropping it entirely, number 2, or 3A, which is dropping it with the job performance expectations and language added in there.
It would be my preference to have a combination of 3 and 3A, and then working with the department directors to do a more strategic look operationally about response times.
Okay.
And what I'll do to carry on, I think that what we'd find is that even if you did 2, we administratively would have done 3A.
Right.
I mean, that would be what, if you dropped it, my step would be to direct her to do what is in 3 and 3A. So even if you didn't, if you just did 2, we're going to handle it as 3 and 3A, because we do know that we need to make sure that there are certain positions that they have that in there in order to make sure that we are not leaving the city short with regards to response for certain things.
Great. So that, for instance, if our recommendation is the full 3 package, the ordinance might come through with just amending the language.
Correct.
And so that we've included all that just so it's on the table in
As
our
guidance.
recommendation to the council. And then the way these things typically go is that our recommendation would probably come, unless this body wants to meet again and look at the language, that the exact language that staff does, our recommendation would go, because this one's pretty simple, would go forward. And you know how that is with the ordinance, and it would be part of our committee report, and then the staff would provide the actual language for the
Right.
council to vote on.
What I would say is you would likely see the comments in 3 and 3A in the whereas of the ordinance, of the
Okay.
change, and so that we would spell out our intentions in the whereas regarding those items.
Okay,
But the actual resolution, the ordinance change would probably, in the personnel code, to change the personnel code would simply say, dropping the residential requirement and the response time requirement as a part of the residency requirement.
so what I'm hearing is if we should adopt 3 all the way through 3A, that would work for you. It's what you would have done anyway, and you've got it figured out how you would put it in the ordinance. Okay. What about, maybe Jeff, if you want to keep going, what about 4 in the 5 series?
I'd like to recommend a combination of 3 and 3A back to the council.
Okay. And not the others, or Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I possibly just pull the people who are either city manager or the department heads here real quick? I mean, is this, I don't know if that's appropriate or not, because I see Mr. Feiner back there as well, but do any of you, is this going to cause any of you guys a problem?
Which part of it? Do away with it?
Yes,
If we do away with it, will it cause a problem?
yes.
No, I don't, if we do away with the residency, I think it will only help in the long run. Not just with the police department, but I think department heads, or, sorry.
I was debating.
Yeah.
Sorry
You were
about that.
talking pretty loud.
If we do away with the residency, I think it helps all the city departments as a whole, not one specific department. And by that, like I said last time, when you talk about street department and stuff like that, where they got to hire people with commercial driver's licenses, and a lot of our communities that surround us, the smaller farming communities, a lot of those individuals have commercial driver's licenses. And so they may be more apt to apply for those type of jobs if they know that they can still live like in Carbondale or wherever and maintain. But I think the big picture would be that it benefits all the departments across the board and not just any of the specific ones. I know you've heard the fire chief and myself, and you've heard union members from the fire department as well as the FOP speaking, but this is not a public safety issue. This is a city of Topeka issue, and it needs to focus really more on the aspect of all the departments and not just public safety.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
We got another chief and another department head, if you're wanting to hear from all of them.
Yeah, I see him breaking down the door to try to get to the microphone. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Chief,
But he did.
Yes.
No problem. I concur with what the chief said. You know, we're just trying to make sure that the city's safe, and it does cover the rest of the city as a whole. I mean, it's going to be good for the whole city. It's not going to change my mind and where I live, I mean, but I'll be glad to see it so we can maybe get more than 15, 25 people applying for jobs.
I guess I'm going to ask, then you do live in the county or in the city?
You live
at least?
downtown.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that, when you said it won't change where you live,
No.
it was a joke. And I see Mr. Finder coming up. I know lives in Washington DC most of the time, but
As a,
that's a joke also.
as a 21-year city resident, I'm proud of that. I absolutely would support this for my departments. For all the non-safety departments, I guess, I can't really speak for them. Our professionals that we recruit, this would open up our pool and selective much more than what we have now. We do have trouble recruiting. I'm not saying this is the reason we have trouble recruiting, but we have lost people because they did not have that option. I have one that just left this year because they had a family thing going and they couldn't stay. So it wasn't an option. If it was an option, they may have stayed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. You know, probably you could probably tell from my questioning last time, this has been, I've really wrestled with this because, well, you know, first of all, the police, I have a lot of police and fire that live either in the city in my district or live in what I'd call the Shawnee Heights area in the county. And they're great people. I want them around. So that's tough. I don't want to encourage a mass exodus from the city or the county. However, that said, you know, you guys are the professionals. You guys are there. I hope I know more about construction than you guys do, and I hope you guys know more about police, fire, and planning than I do. And you definitely know more about city management than I do. So even though I'm not ecstatic about it, I would support doing like 3 and 3A.
Okay. Well, maybe the same question then to the 3 department heads who are here. The concern about the affirmative recruitment that we've been doing, do you see that, you don't even have to talk about just your own department. Do you see that with the residency requirement dropped, that we would continue those affirmative hiring efforts?
I would say, from my standpoint, Chief's coming on the mic, we have to. We cannot.
I would hope so.
The pool of individuals is continuing to get smaller for many positions, and so without doing affirmative action type recruitment, we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage. And we do that for multiple reasons. We want a diverse department, a diverse employment group, but also, why wouldn't we want a good qualified person? And we're out there seeking that good qualified person, so we want to go wherever we can find those individuals in order to recruit them.
I personally would say, without a residency, then those efforts would be enhanced even more. Like I said the last time, we at the police department, we recruit the most qualified individual, wherever that individual's at. Where we choose to go looking for those qualified individuals, this enhances that ability, because we may find those individuals that want to live in Lawrence, that live in Kansas City, but will come work in Topeka. And so I think when you talk about those type of efforts, I think this enhances that, because it opens up where you can go look for them. There's only, like I said, in the city of Topeka, we cannot support the needs of the Topeka Police Department right now from the residents of the city of Topeka. We're just not getting the applicants. So with that being said, we've got to go look for them. We've got to go find them. And so with this limitation off of it, it gives us one more recruiting tool that we can go look wherever. And so I think, you know, that it only enhances those efforts, to be honest with you, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Jackie.
Jackie?
If I could also, just to complement what Chief said, the other thing is that by taking away residency, HR has oversight on the recruitment as a whole. It doesn't take away those local things that we're already doing and working with departments doing, going to local job fairs, going to events, going into the school districts and doing job fairs and touching the kids. We work very closely with the CARE program through the rescue mission. That doesn't change what we're doing. It would just add enhancements. For example, now we go to the Haskell job fair, but there's a residency requirement, so that requires those people to move if they want to work for us, even though we are already recruiting there. So I think it just enhances what we're doing and opens up more opportunities. But I want to be very clear, from an oversight position, we would continue to do those local things that we are doing and trying to get candidates locally for our positions.
And if I could respond, I know that there's a strong interest in developing local talent, but also if we've got high-end talent and we're not reaching out, I think you and I had a discussion just once on, if we've got some high, positions at any level that have some very specific qualifications that may be hard to recruit for anyway. If we're not going to where they are, it might mean that we should be going out of town, and at this point, we're not. And so if we're not going, Haskell's fortunately right down the street, but maybe we should be at HBCUs recruiting some of those specialty positions so that we mix our pools. And it sounds like we're not doing that. And I don't want the residents dropping it to have us just go, we're going to be good enough.
No, I would see it being quite the opposite.
Okay.
I think that if there's not a residency, it makes putting those resources in further away areas to attract and retain more viable, because you don't want to spend time and money going somewhere where it's more of a guess whether or not they would want to come and live in Shawnee County. So I just think it would make us look at that different as a new opportunity versus something that might not be efficient use of time and resources at this point.
Okay. Bill, did you have any more comments on that subject? Okay.
In terms of diversity? No, I would agree with everything that's been said. I had, years ago, I had probably some of the same hesitancy that you might have of dropping this, but I've seen over the years when professionals have come through our door to do a very city-centric job, and they may not be necessarily even in the city. They're out beyond where their job takes them. Those were some of my best employees. So I think expanding that would even be better. There's no excuse that we would lose people now. So I don't see the harm. I don't see the harm, and I think through job performance, it really helps keep that, as long as you're doing your job and you have those city-centric sensitivities, that's what supervisors and that's what our managers are here to make sure that happens.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, any other comments then on numbers 4 and 5? Anybody interested in passing them? If,
Madam Chair, I think given the fact that we're already doing that, I just don't know if this would add any actual value to have those added. But I'm not against them either, but it's just.
hopefully the conversation is enough. People say that all the time and then they don't do it and they don't get results, and we haven't been getting results. So it seems like we need to do something a little different. And if the residency requirement will help, that's fine. But I both in terms of encouraging people to live in Topeka, which we can do much more freely with no residency requirement perhaps, and more fully, as well as the recruitment, maybe an upset. I would entertain a motion for 3 and 3A.
I'd like to move for a combination of 3 and 3A.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Thank you. Thank you, staff. We have no other items before. You want to clap? This is a recommendation. This is a step along the way, but it is unanimous and is well vetted. There are minutes that will be shared and in these documents, so hopefully that will be helpful. We have no other items before the committee. We are also at the very end of our terms on this committee, as there will be new committees on February 1. So my inclination would be then that we will ask Liz to get these minutes done as soon as possible. We have a process in our charter that allows her to just send them to us for comment, and if they're okay, they will be considered adopted so that they don't carry forward to some new committee that wasn't here. So with that, City Manager.
I would like to thank the committee for taking this seriously and pursuing it in a dutiful way so that we could get this moved forward as a possible change to help all of our employees and those that might come in the future. So, thank you.
Could you give people a clue as to what the time turnaround might be?
I don't know for sure. We need to work on writing up the ordinance, and we have a few other things that we're working on. So, but hopefully we can introduce it at some point in February.
Okay. Stay tuned. Thank you. We are adjourned.
All right, thank you.
We got you.
See y'all next